Imagine you're 80 years old looking back at your life, and someone asks you, did you ever figure out why you kept repeating the same painful patterns? Why you chose partners who hurt you? Why you sabotaged the things you wanted most? What would you say? Freud believed most people die without answering that question, not because they didn't try, but because they looked in the wrong place. They thought the answer was in willpower, discipline, positive thinking, but Freud said no. The answer is in the dark, and then in the parts of yourself you've been taught to ignore, in the dreams you forget, the jokes that slip out, the moments you say, I don't know why I did that. This video is about learning to see in the dark, because once you do, the patterns stop controlling you. You start controlling them. Here's what most people get wrong about Freud. They think his ideas are outdated, too sexual, too weird for modern life. And on the surface, they're right. Who cares about penis envy or Oedipal conflicts in 2025? But here's the deeper truth nobody tells you. Freud wasn't trying to explain sex. He was trying to explain suffering. Why do intelligent people stay in toxic relationships? Why do successful people sabotage their own success? Why do you know exactly what you should do, but keep doing the opposite? Modern psychology gives you coping strategies. Cognitive behavioral therapy gives you thought patterns to challenge. But Freud asked a more frightening question. What if you're not in control to begin with? See, we live in a culture that worships consciousness, goals, manifestation, intentionality. We think, if I just think the right thoughts, I'll get the right life. But Freud discovered that beneath your conscious intentions is an entire hidden continent of desires, fears, and drives you never agreed to. And that hidden part, it's running the show. This video isn't going to give you 5 tips to optimize your morning routine. It's going to show you the machinery underneath your personality, the defense mechanisms, the repressed material, the repetition compulsions, and teach you how to work with that machinery instead of against it. The myth we're busting, you are a rational being occasionally disrupted by emotion. The truth, you are an irrational being occasionally interrupted by rationality. Once you see that, everything you thought was your fault starts to make sense. And that's not just liberating. That's the beginning of actual change. Now let me take you somewhere. Imagine walking into a theater. The curtain rises and you see a play unfolding, a drama about your life. There's a character who looks like you, talks like you, makes your decisions. You're watching from the audience, utterly absorbed, thinking, yes, this is me. I am this character. But then, mid-performance, the lights flicker. For just a moment, you glimpse something backstage. Stage hands moving props, a director whispering cues, actors waiting in the wings, and you realize I'm not the character. I'm not even the playwright. I'm the audience member who forgot they bought a ticket. This is what Freud discovered. Your conscious mind, the you that thinks, plans, decides, is not the author of your life. It's the audience. The real action happens backstage in what Freud called the unconscious. Now stay with me here because this gets interesting. That theater isn't just a metaphor. It's the actual structure of your psychological life. Let me show you what I mean. The stage hands, those unseen workers moving things around in the dark, they're your defense mechanisms. Repression, projection, denial, rationalization. They're constantly rearranging the stage so you only see what you can handle seeing. If a prop is too painful, a memory, a feeling, a desire that threatens your sense of who you are, The stagehands hide it. They don't ask permission. They just do it. Because their job is to keep the show running smoothly, even if that means lying to you about what's really happening. The script itself, the actual dialogue and action of the play, that was written a long time ago. Mostly when you were a child, before you could read, before you could reason, before you even had language for what was happening to you. Your parents, your siblings, your early wounds, and joys, they wrote the first draft. And here's the thing that nobody wants to hear. You've been performing variations of that same script your entire life. Different actors, different settings, but the same basic plot. The woman who keeps dating emotionally unavailable men, she's not unlucky. She's performing a script written when she was 4 years old, trying to win love from a father who was never really present. The man who sabotages every success just when it's within reach, he's not self-destructive. He's following stage directions written by a voice that said, "Who do you think you are?" So many times it became his internal narrator. And then there's the director. Freud called this the unconscious drives, eros and thanatos, the life instinct and the death instinct. But forget the fancy Greek names for a moment. Think of it this way. There's a part of you that wants to grow, connect, create, love, expand. That's eros. It's the force that makes you reach out. Take risks. Say yes to life, even though life is terrifying. And then there's another part, quieter, more subtle, that wants rest, dissolution, an end to the exhausting effort of being a person. That's thanatos, not suicide, not violence, but the gentle pull toward nothingness, the appeal of scrolling for hours, of numbing out, of not having to try so hard anymore. These two forces are directing the play simultaneously. They're both you. They're both real. And they're often working against each other. That's why you feel torn. That's why you want connection but push people away. That's why you set goals and then sabotage them. You're not confused. You're just being directed by two directors with different visions for your life. And finally, there's you, the conscious ego, the audience member. How you're sitting there watching all of this unfold, trying to make sense of it, thinking you're choosing it, but mostly you're just narrating a story that's already happening. You say things like, "I decided to quit my job," or "I chose to get angry," or "I fell in love." But if you really look closely, if you're really honest, you'll see that most of those things happened to you, not by you. The decision was already made backstage. Your conscious mind just came up with a plausible story to explain it after the fact. And here's the heartbreaking part. Most people never realize they're in the audience. They spend their whole lives thinking they're in control, making choices, living intentionally, but they're just watching a script that was written when they were too young to understand the language. Freud's great gift wasn't optimism. It was honesty. He said, if you want freedom, you first have to admit you're trapped. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds hopeless. If I'm not in control, what's the point? And that's the wrong question. The right question is, how do I stop being a passive spectator? How do I step backstage and meet the real authors of my life? That's where Freud's structural model comes in. And it's stranger and more beautiful than you think. Picture this. You live in an apartment with two roommates. One of them, let's call him ED, is a toddler. He wants what he wants now. He doesn't care about consequences, social norms, or your mortgage payment. If he's hungry, he eats. If he's angry, he screams. If he wants something, he takes it. Pure desire, no filter, no guilt, no future thinking, just the raw, immediate demand. I want, I want, I want. Your other roommate, we'll call her superego, is the opposite. She's a strict, moralistic school teacher. She has rules for everything. Don't eat that. Don't say that. Don't even think that. What will the neighbors say? She's internalized every rule your parents, your culture, your religion ever gave you, and she enforces them with guilt and shame. She's the voice that says you should and you shouldn't, and good people don't do that. And what's wrong with you? Now here's the problem. You, the conscious thinking you, are stuck in the middle. Freud called this the ego. And your entire life is spent trying to negotiate between these two impossible roommates. Let me give you an example so you can feel how this actually works in your daily life. You're at a dinner party. Your boss says something condescending, something that makes your stomach tighten and your face flush. Ide immediately wants to respond. He wants to tell your boss exactly what you think of him. He wants to flip the table, storm out, scream. He doesn't care about your career or your reputation. He just wants the immediate satisfaction of expression. And he's loud. He's banging on the walls of your mind, demanding attention. Meanwhile, superego is horrified. You can't say that. You'll ruin your career. You'll embarrass yourself. Everyone will think you're unprofessional and unstable. What would your mother say? What would people think? She's flooding you with catastrophic predictions and moral judgments. She's making you feel guilty for even having the impulse. And there you are, ego caught between them, trying to find a compromise. Maybe you make a joke, a subtle, passive-aggressive joke that lets you express just a tiny bit of your anger without crossing any lines. Or maybe you excuse yourself to the bathroom and spend 5 minutes in there doing deep breathing exercises while both roommates yell at each other inside your head. Or maybe you smile politely, say nothing, and then obsess about the interaction for 3 days afterward, replaying it, imagining what you should have said, hating yourself for being weak. That exhausting internal negotiation, that's your entire psychological life. And here's what Freud understood that most self-help gurus don't. You can't get rid of the toddler or the school teacher. They're both you. The toddler keeps you alive, hungry, desiring. He's your vitality, your passion, your life force. Without him, you'd be a robot, just going through the motions with no real feeling. The school teacher keeps you civilized, socially functional. She's your conscience, your values, your ability to live in community with others. Without her, you'd be a monster, hurting people without remorse, living only for immediate gratification. The goal isn't to silence one or the other. It's to become a better mediator, a wiser ego, someone who can listen to both voices and make decisions that honor your needs without destroying your life. But here's where most people get stuck. They pretend the toddler doesn't exist. They repress him, deny him, starve him. They spend decades listening only to the school teacher, trying to be good, trying to be appropriate, trying to follow all the rules. And then they wonder why they have panic attacks, sexual dysfunction, or inexplicable rage. The toddler doesn't disappear. He just goes underground. And that's when things get dangerous. Because when you repress id, he doesn't just quietly accept it. He finds other ways to express himself. He leaks out in symptoms, in behaviors you don't understand, in dreams that wake you up sweating, in sudden, overwhelming urges that seem to come from nowhere. Freud spent his entire career documenting this process. He called it the return of the repressed, and it's happening all around you, all the time. The woman who's been the perfect daughter for 40 years suddenly has an affair. The man who's been calm and controlled his whole life suddenly explodes in rage over something trivial. The person who's never touched alcohol starts drinking every night. These aren't random breakdowns, they're eruptions. The toddler has been locked in the basement for so long that when he finally breaks out, he's feral. He's not asking anymore. He's taking. So what happens when the ego fails? When the negotiation breaks down? That's where symptoms begin and where Freud's real genius reveals itself. Let me tell you about a woman. We'll call her Anna. Anna couldn't move her right arm. No physical cause. No nerve damage. No torn muscles or pinched nerves. Doctors were baffled. They ran every test. Everything came back normal. Her arm should work, but it didn't. Freud sat with her and asked a simple question. When did this start? Turns out it started the day after her father died. She had been caring for him for months, exhausting, agonizing work, feeding him, bathing him, sitting beside his bed through long, silent nights. And on his last night, she had been sitting in a chair beside him, her right arm draped over the armrest. She was so tired, bone tired, soul tired. And she fell asleep, just for a moment. And when she woke up, he was gone, dead. And the first thought that came to her mind was, if only I'd stayed awake. If only I'd held his hand. If only I'd been more present, more attentive, more loving. This is my fault. Now consciously, Anna knew this wasn't true. She knew she'd done everything possible. She knew she was a devoted daughter. She knew her father's death wasn't her fault. But knowing something consciously doesn't make the unconscious agree. And deep down, in a place she couldn't reach with logic, she believed she had failed him. That guilt was unbearable, intolerable. It threatened to destroy her. So her mind found a solution, a brilliant, desperate solution. It made the arm the problem. If the arm is paralyzed, she doesn't have to feel the guilt. She doesn't have to face the unbearable thought that she failed her father. The arm becomes a symbol, a stand-in for the feeling she can't allow herself to feel. And the paralysis, it's not a malfunction. It's a defense, a protection. Her unconscious is saying, this feeling is too dangerous. I'm going to lock it in your body so you don't have to experience it consciously. Freud called this conversion, the process by which emotional pain converts into physical symptoms. And it's happening all the time. Not just in dramatic Victorian cases, but in your migraines, your stomach problems, your chronic fatigue, your back pain that no doctor can explain. Your body is not betraying you. It's protecting you from feelings you've decided you can't survive. But here's the cruel irony. The symptom doesn't solve the problem. It just locks the problem in a room and throws away the key. Anna's paralyzed arm kept her safe from guilt, but it also kept her trapped in it. Because you can't heal what you won't feel. The guilt didn't go anywhere. It just took up residence in her arm. And every day she looked at that useless limb, she was looking at her unfelt grief, her unspoken rage, her unbearable sense of failure. And this is where Freud's method becomes almost mystical. He believed that if you could bring the locked room into the light, if you could talk about the thing you've been hiding from yourself, the symptom would dissolve. Not because you solved it. Not because you did affirmations or positive thinking or cognitive restructuring. Because you stopped needing it. Once Anna could finally say, I'm devastated that I fell asleep. I'm furious at myself for being human. I wanted to be perfect for him, and I wasn't. Once she could speak those words out loud and survive them, the arms started working again. This is the essence of psychoanalysis. The cure is in the conversation. Not advice, not techniques, not strategies. Just the slow, painful, sacred act of saying the unsayable, of bringing the unconscious into consciousness, of meeting the parts of yourself you've been running from and saying, I see you, I hear you, I'm not afraid of you anymore. Now let's take these stories and break them down. Let's look at the actual mechanics, the ideas, the structures, the tools Freud gave us to navigate the unconscious, because this isn't just theory. This is a map of your inner world. And once you have the map, you can stop getting lost. First, let's talk about what the unconscious actually is. Because people think the unconscious is where you shove bad memories, like a psychological junk drawer. You open it once a year, wince at the mess, and quickly shut it again. But that's not what Freud meant. The unconscious isn't passive storage. It's active. It's alive. It has intentions, strategies, desires. It's constantly working behind the scenes, shaping your moods, your choices, your relationships, and you're not invited to the meeting. Think of it this way. Right now, as you listen to this, your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing, your cells are dividing, your immune system is fighting off pathogens. All of that is happening without your conscious involvement. Well, you don't have to think, okay, heart, beat now. It just happens. The unconscious works the same way. It's processing information, making decisions, running programs, all without consulting your conscious mind. And most of what it's doing, it learned to do a long time ago. Here's the mechanism. When you experience something overwhelming, trauma, grief, shame, rage, your conscious mind has to decide, can I handle this? Can I integrate this into my sense of who I am? And if the answer is no, the mind uses a process called repression. It actively pushes that experience out of consciousness. Not because the experience disappears, but because it's too destabilizing to keep in awareness. But here's the thing. People miss. Repression isn't forgetting. It's active forgetting. It requires energy. Your mind is constantly working to keep certain thoughts, feelings, and memories out of awareness. It's like holding a beach ball underwater. It takes effort, constant, exhausting effort, and that work costs you. It drains your vitality, your attention, your emotional capacity. And here's the paradox. The more you repress something, the more power it has over you. The feeling you won't feel becomes the feeling that controls your life. Let me give you an example. A man grows up with a father who's violent and unpredictable. He learns early. Anger is dangerous. Anger destroys. If I get angry, I'll become like him. So he represses his anger. He decides, consciously or unconsciously, I will never be angry. I will be calm, rational, controlled. And for years, maybe decades, it works. He's known as the nice guy, the peacemaker, the one who never loses his temper. But then something happens. His wife makes a small, thoughtless comment. Nothing terrible, just a little jab. And something inside him snaps. He doesn't yell, he doesn't hit, but he withdraws completely. He gives her the silent treatment for days. He becomes cold, distant, punishing, and he has no idea why he's doing it. because the anger isn't gone. It's just underground, and it's leaking out in passive aggression, withdrawal, subtle cruelty. Or take a woman who represses her grief. Maybe she lost someone important when she was young, and maybe everyone around her said, "Be strong, don't cry, move on." So she did. She packed the grief away in a box and got on with her life. But now, 20 years later, she can't feel joy. She can't connect deeply. She goes through the motions of happiness, but she's numb inside. Because when you repress one emotion, you don't get to choose which others go with it. You numb everything. The grief she wouldn't feel became a wall between her and all feeling. So here's the relief, and it's a strange relief, but it's real. Once you understand this, everything changes. Because now your symptoms, your anxiety, your compulsions, your inexplicable sadness aren't defects. They're messages, urgent, desperate messages from a part of you that's been silenced for too long. The panic attack isn't random. It's your body saying there's something you're not dealing with. The compulsive eating isn't weakness. It's an attempt to soothe a feeling you don't have another way to soothe. The insomnia isn't bad luck. It's your unconscious keeping you awake because there's something it needs you to know. And the moment you start listening, really listening, the symptoms start to relax. Not because you've fixed anything, but because you've stopped fighting. You've stopped seeing yourself as broken and started seeing yourself as communicating with yourself in the only language available. Now let's talk about defense mechanisms, because this is where Freud gets really practical. He identified dozens of defense mechanisms, psychological strategies your mind uses to protect you from unbearable feelings. And most people hear this and think, "Oh, so I'm fragile and cowardly." But no, you're brilliant. Defense mechanisms aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of creativity. Your mind, faced with overwhelming pain, found a way to keep you functional. That's genius. Let me walk you through some of the main ones, and I want you to see if you recognize yourself. First, there's projection. Projection is when you can't admit a feeling in yourself, so you become convinced that everyone else has that feeling about you. You can't admit you're angry, so you become convinced everyone else is angry at you. You can't admit you're judgmental, so you feel constantly judged. You can't admit you're thinking about leaving your relationship, so you become paranoid that your partner is going to leave you. Your mind externalizes the feeling so you don't have to own it. And here's what's wild. Projection doesn't feel like projection. It feels like perception. You genuinely believe that other people are angry, judgmental, planning to abandon you. You're not making it up. You're seeing your internal state reflected in the external world. And the only way to break the pattern is to ask, what if this isn't about them? What if this is about me? Then there's rationalization. Rationalization is when you tell yourself a logical, acceptable reason for something you did for emotional reasons. You didn't get the job, so you tell yourself you didn't want it anyway. You get rejected, so you convince yourself they weren't right for you. You make a selfish choice, so you construct an elaborate moral justification for why it was actually the right thing to do. You're not lying. You genuinely believe the rationalization, because the truth, I failed, I was rejected, I hurt someone, is unbearable. Rationalization isn't bad, it's protective. It lets you move forward instead of collapsing under the weight of every disappointment. but it becomes a problem when it's your only strategy. When you rationalize everything, you never learn. You never grow. You never take responsibility, because in your story, nothing is ever your fault. Then there's displacement. Displacement is when you can't express a feeling toward the person who triggered it, so you redirect it somewhere safer. You're furious at your boss, but you can't say anything because you need the job. So you come home and snap at your partner over something trivial. You're not really angry about the dishes. You're angry at your boss. But your partner is safer. Your unconscious knows you won't lose your partner over one fight, but you might lose your job. So it displaces the anger. The tragedy of displacement is that you end up hurting the people you love because you can't confront the people you fear. And those people, your partner, your kids, your friends, they have no idea what's really going on. They just know you're being unfairly harsh, and you know it too. But in the moment, you can't stop yourself. And then there's sublimation. Sublimation is the healthiest defense mechanism. It's when you take a destructive or socially unacceptable impulse and transform it into something creative, productive, beautiful. You have aggressive impulses, so you become a boxer. You have sexual energy, so you become an artist, a poet, a dancer. You have grief, so you write music. Your mind transforms destructive energy into something socially acceptable, even beautiful. Freud believed sublimation was the foundation of civilization, that all art, all culture, all human achievement comes from sublimated desire, that the opera house and the cathedral and the novel are all elaborate ways of channeling what would otherwise be destructive energy into something transcendent. And there's something deeply hopeful in that idea, that your darkness, properly directed, becomes your gift. The problem isn't that you use defense mechanisms. Everyone does. You have to. Life is too overwhelming without them. The problem is when they stop working, when the shield becomes a cage, when projection makes you paranoid, when rationalization keeps you stuck, when denial kills your relationships, when displacement ruins your marriage, when sublimation tips into workaholism or artistic self-destruction. Freud's point wasn't stop defending yourself. It was understand how you're defending yourself so you can choose a better strategy. Because once you see the mechanism, you create space. You're no longer unconscious. You're awake. And in that wakefulness, you can choose differently. Now let's talk about childhood, because this is where people get angry at Freud. He says everything important about your personality was formed by age 6. And modern adults hate that. We want to believe we're self-made, autonomous, free. We want to believe our childhood doesn't define us, that we've moved on, grown past it, transcended it. But Freud wasn't saying you're doomed. He was saying you learn to survive in a specific environment, and you're still using those survival strategies, even though the environment has changed. Think about it this way. Imagine you grow up in a house where love is conditional, where you're only valued when you perform, achieve, make your parents proud. What do you learn? You learn, my worth is outside of me. If I achieve enough, I'll finally be loved. So you become an overachiever, driven, relentless, never satisfied. And it works for a while. You get good grades, you get promotions, you get external validation. But inside, you're exhausted because no amount of achievement fills the hole. Because the hole isn't about achievement. It's about the love you didn't get when you were 4 years old. Or imagine you grow up in a house where expressing needs is punished, where asking for help is seen as weakness, where your parents say, don't be so needy, or figure it out yourself, or I have enough to deal with. What do you learn? You learn, my needs are a burden. If I have needs, I'll be abandoned. So you become hyper-independent, self-sufficient to the point of isolation. You never ask for help. You never admit you're struggling. And people admire you for it. They say, you're so strong, so capable. But inside, you're lonely because you've cut yourself off from the very thing humans need most, interdependence. Freud broke childhood development into stages. And yes, they're weird. Yes, they're overly focused on bodily zones and sexual development in ways that make modern people uncomfortable. But strip away the Freudian jargon, and here's what he was really saying. At different stages of development, you're learning fundamental lessons about trust, control, power, and love. And if those lessons go wrong, you carry the wound forward. The oral stage, the first year and a half of life, is about trust and dependency. This is when you learn. Is the world safe? Will my needs be met? Can I rely on others? If this stage goes well, you develop basic trust. You believe the universe is essentially benign. If it goes badly, if you're neglected, if your caregiver is inconsistent or absent, you develop basic mistrust. And that mistrust follows you. You become an adult who's constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, who can't fully relax into love because you're always expecting abandonment. The anal stage, roughly 18 months to 3 years, is about control and autonomy. This is when you're learning to control your body, your environment, your impulses. And this is when parents start imposing rules. Potty training is the classic example. If this stage goes well, you develop a healthy sense of autonomy and self-control. If it goes badly, if parents are too rigid, too shaming, too controlling, you might become obsessive about control. Everything has to be perfect, orderly, predictable. Or you might rebel and become chaotic, messy, oppositional. Either way, you're still reacting to that early dynamic. The phallic stage, ages 3 to 6, is where Freud gets really weird with the Oedipus complex. And look, I'm not going to defend all of Freud's ideas here. The notion that every boy wants to sleep with his mother and kill his father, that's specific to Freud's Victorian context, and it doesn't hold up universally. But here's what he was on to. Around age 4, you start to understand power, gender, rivalry, and love in more complex ways. You notice that there are relationships you're excluded from. Your parents have a relationship with each other that you're not part of, and you feel jealous. You want to be the center of attention. You want exclusive love, and how your parents handle that, whether they're gentle and boundaried or harsh and shaming, shapes how you relate to authority and intimacy for the rest of your life. If you learn that your desires are acceptable, but not always gratifiable, you develop healthy boundaries. If you learn that your desires are shameful or dangerous, you develop guilt and sexual repression. If you learn that you can manipulate one parent against the other, you develop a lifelong pattern of triangulation. So when Freud says everything happens by age 6, he doesn't mean nothing else matters. He means the foundation is set, the basic template for how you relate to yourself, to others, to desire, to authority. That's established early. And everything that comes after is a variation on that theme. Now here's the reframe that might actually set you free. You're not broken because of your childhood. You're adapted. You develop strategies to survive your particular family, your particular wounds. The tragedy is that you're still using those strategies in situations where they no longer apply. You're a 40-year-old using the survival skills of a 4-year-old, and that's not failure. That's loyalty. You're loyal to the child you were. Freud's invitation is this: honor that child, and then gently, lovingly teach them that the war is over. Let's talk about dreams now, because everyone knows Freud said dreams are wish fulfillment, but that's not quite right. Freud said dreams are disguised wish fulfillment, meaning your unconscious has desires it can't express directly, so it smuggles them into your dreams in symbolic form. Dreams are the unconscious speaking in code. Here's how it works. There's what Freud called the manifest content, what you actually remember from the dream. You're late for a train. You're naked in public. You're back in school taking a test you didn't study for. That's the surface story. But underneath that is the latent content, what the dream really means. The train you're missing isn't about trains. It's about an opportunity you're terrified of losing. The nakedness isn't about being literally naked. It's about feeling exposed, vulnerable, seen in a way you can't control. The test isn't about school. It's about feeling unprepared for the demands of your current life. The unconscious uses symbols because direct expression would be too threatening. If your dream openly showed you the thing you actually want, maybe to leave your marriage, maybe to quit your job, maybe to confront your parent, you'd wake up in a panic. So the unconscious disguises it. It gives you a symbolic version that's just close enough to work on the problem without overwhelming you. But here's what's really wild. Freud didn't believe dreams were mystical prophecies. He believed they were psychological negotiations. Your unconscious is trying to satisfy a forbidden desire without waking you up. The dream is a compromise. It's saying, I can't give you the real thing, but I can give you a symbolic substitute. And sometimes that's enough to let you keep sleeping. Which means your dreams are showing you what you won't let yourself want while awake. They're showing you the censored material, the desires, fears, and longings your conscious mind has decided are too dangerous to acknowledge. And that's terrifying. But it's also liberating. Because if you can learn to read your dreams, if you can decode the symbols, you get direct access to the unconscious. You get to see what's really going on beneath the surface. And you don't need a professional analyst to do this. You just need curiosity and patience. Keep a dream journal. When you wake up, write down what you remember. Don't analyze it immediately, just record it. Then later, ask yourself, if this dream were a message from my unconscious, what would it be trying to tell me? Not what does this symbol mean in general, but what does it mean for me in my life right now? Sometimes the meaning reveals itself immediately. Sometimes it takes days or weeks. But the act of paying attention, the act of treating your dreams as meaningful, that alone changes something. You're sending a message to your unconscious. I'm listening. I'm willing to hear what you have to say. And the unconscious responds to that. It starts communicating more clearly. Now let's talk about sex, because everyone thinks Freud was obsessed with sex. And in a way, he was. But not the way people think. Let's get clear on this. When Freud talked about libido, he wasn't just talking about sexual desire. He was talking about life energy, the force that drives you to connect, create, desire, grow. He used the word sexual because Victorian society had no other language for bodily pleasure, for intimacy, for the raw animal aliveness that makes life worth living. So when Freud said everything is sexual, he meant everything is alive. Everything is connected to desire, to the body, to the vulnerability of wanting something you might not get. Think about it. Why do you feel anxious before a date? Not because sex might happen, but because intimacy might happen. Because you might be seen and rejected. Because desire makes you vulnerable. Why does rejection hurt physically? Because the body doesn't distinguish between emotional pain and physical pain. Why does creativity feel erotic? Because it's an act of bringing something into being, of expressing your inner world, of risking judgment for the sake of creation. These are all expressions of libido, the willingness to risk, to open, to want. And here's the paradox that Freud understood deeply. We're terrified of our own aliveness. We repress desire because desire makes us vulnerable. We numb pleasure because pleasure reminds us of pain. We avoid intimacy because intimacy requires exposure. We'd rather be safe and half dead than alive and at risk. Freud's controversial claim was this: the degree to which you suppress your sexuality, and again, I mean sexuality in the broadest sense, the life force, is the degree to which you suppress your vitality. Not because you need to act on every impulse, not because repression is always bad, but because denying the impulse costs you your life force. When you say, I don't want that, when you really do, when you say, I'm fine, when you're not, when you close down your desire to avoid disappointment, every time you do that, you'll lose a little bit of aliveness. And over time, that adds up. You end up living in a gray, muted life, going through the motions, doing what you're supposed to do, and you tell yourself you're content. But underneath, there's a quiet desperation, a sense that you're not really living, just existing, and you don't know how to get back to the person you were before you learned to be so careful. Freud believed that civilization requires some repression. We can't all just do whatever we want whenever we want. Society would collapse. But he also believed that we've gone too far, that we've repressed so much of our natural vitality that we're making ourselves sick. And the cure isn't to become hedonists or abandon all morality. The cure is to find the middle path, to acknowledge desire without being enslaved by it, to express need without being consumed by it, to be alive without being destructive. And that brings us to one of Freud's most disturbing ideas, the death drive. Late in his life, Freud proposed thanatos, the death instinct. The idea that within every human being is not just a drive toward life, pleasure, and connection, but also a drive toward destruction, dissolution, and nothingness. People hated this. Even his followers rejected it. But Freud saw something true. Part of you wants to disappear. Not because you're suicidal, not because you're depressed, but because effort is exhausting. Desire is painful. Consciousness is a burden. And sometimes, secretly, quietly, you long for the relief of not having to try anymore. Think about the appeal of scrolling for hours, of binge watching, of getting drunk or high, of losing yourself in distraction. That's not laziness. It's a small, safe taste of dissolution, a temporary break from the exhausting work of being a self. Or think about self-sabotage. You're on the verge of success and you blow it. You're in a good relationship and you destroy it. You're finally getting healthy and you relapse. Why? Because success requires continued effort, continued vigilance, continued responsibility. And part of you just wants to rest, to give up, to stop trying so hard. Freud wasn't saying give in to the death drive. He was saying acknowledge it. Because if you don't, it leaks out in self-sabotage, addiction, passive aggression, the slow erosion of your own life. When you pretend the death drive doesn't exist, you can't negotiate with it. You can't find healthy ways to honor your need for rest, for release, for letting go. Once you see that both drives exist, eros, the life instinct, and thanatos, the death instinct, you stop judging yourself so harshly. You're not broken for wanting to give up sometimes. You're human. The question isn't, how do I kill the death drive? It's, how do I honor my need for rest without letting it consume me? How do I take breaks without giving up entirely? How do I let go of some things so I can hold on to others? And that's the wisdom in Freud's late work. Life isn't about choosing between life and death. It's about finding the balance, knowing when to push and when to rest, when to strive and when to surrender, when to hold on and when to let go. Now, I've given you a lot of theory, a lot of ideas, a lot of maps of the inner world, but maps are useless if you don't know how to read them. So let me give you some practices, simple, grounded things you can do to start working with your unconscious instead of against it. First, free association journaling. Freud's primary therapeutic tool was free association, saying whatever comes to mind without censoring it. You can do this alone. Here's how. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Write without stopping. No editing, no rereading, no judging. If you get stuck, write, I don't know what to write, until something else comes. Don't try to be coherent or profound. Just let the words flow. What you're doing, bypassing the ego's censorship. You're letting the unconscious speak, and you'll be surprised what comes out. Old memories you haven't thought about in years. Strange resentments you didn't know you were holding. Desires you didn't know you had. Fears you've been pretending don't exist. Don't analyze it in the moment. Just let it flow. The analysis comes later when you reread with curiosity instead of shame. This practice is powerful because it reveals what your conscious mind is working so hard to hide. And often just seeing it on the page is enough to loosen its grip. You realize, oh, I'm angry at my mother. I've been pretending I'm not, but I am. And just that acknowledgement creates space. You don't have to do anything about it immediately. You just have to stop pretending. Second, name your defense mechanisms. For 1 week, pay attention to moments when you feel uncomfortable and notice what you do next. Do you change the subject? That's avoidance. Do you make a joke? That's humor as deflection. Do you blame someone else? That's projection. Do you convince yourself it doesn't matter? That's rationalization. Do you explain it away with logic? That's intellectualization. Don't judge it, just name it. Say to yourself, oh, interesting. I'm using humor to avoid feeling sad. Or, I'm rationalizing because the truth is too painful. Naming the mechanism creates distance. You're no longer unconscious. You're watching yourself. And in that space of observation, you can choose differently. The goal isn't to stop using defense mechanisms. You need them. The goal is to become conscious of them, to see when they're helping and when they're hurting, to decide, is this defense still serving me or is it keeping me trapped? Third, the unsent letter. Think of someone you're angry at, hurt by, or unresolved with. Maybe they're alive, maybe they're dead. Doesn't matter. Write them a letter you'll never send. Say everything. No filter, no politeness, no self-censorship. Be petty. Be vicious. Be honest. Let yourself say the things you'd never say to their face. Then, here's the key. Write their response to you. Not what you wish they'd say. Not what a perfect, enlightened version of them would say, but what they would actually say based on who they really are. Let them defend themselves. Let them be defensive, dismissive, hurtful even. What you're doing, externalizing the internal conflict. You're getting the argument out of your head and onto paper, where you can see it clearly. And often, you'll discover that the person you're angry at is a version of yourself, or that the resolution you need doesn't require their participation, or that you've been having this argument for 20 years and it's time to let it go. This practice is powerful because it gives you closure without needing the other person to change. You don't need them to apologize. You don't need them to understand. You just need to express what's been trapped inside you. Fourth, dream tracking the Freudian way. Keep a dream journal by your bed. When you wake up, write down what happened in the dream. That's the manifest content. How did you feel during the dream? Anxious, excited, terrified, peaceful? Feeling is often more important than content, and what symbols or images stood out? What felt significant or strange? Then ask yourself, if this dream were a message from my unconscious, what would it be trying to tell me? Don't force an interpretation. Just sit with the question. Let it simmer. Often the meaning reveals itself days later in an unrelated moment. You're driving or showering, and suddenly you think, oh, that dream about being chased wasn't about fear. It was about avoiding a confrontation I need to have. The point isn't to become a dream expert. The point is to start paying attention, to treat your dreams as meaningful communication rather than random noise. Because when you do that, your unconscious starts speaking more clearly. And finally, the what do I want meditation. This is so simple it sounds stupid, but it's profound. Sit quietly, close your eyes. Ask yourself, what do I want right now? Not what should I want or what's reasonable to want. Just what do I want? Let the answer surprise you. You might want to scream. You might want to quit your job. You might want to be held. You might want to run away. You might want to cry. Don't act on it immediately. Just acknowledge the desire without judgment. Say to yourself, I want this. This is what I want. This simple practice reconnects you with your id, the raw, unfiltered want beneath all your conditioning. And paradoxically, acknowledging the want often makes it less urgent. Because the desire wasn't demanding to be fulfilled. It was demanding to be seen. It was saying, I exist. I matter. Stop pretending I'm not here. Once you start seeing your desires clearly, once you stop pretending you don't want what you want, you can make real choices. Not reactive choices based on repression, but conscious choices based on full awareness. You can say, I want this, and I'm choosing not to pursue it because the cost is too high. Or I want this, and I'm going to find a way to honor that want without destroying my life. Either way, you're no longer unconscious. You're awake. So here we are. We've spent this time together walking through Freud's universe. And maybe you're feeling unsettled. Maybe you're angry. Maybe you're relieved. All of those are correct responses because Freud didn't give us a map to happiness. He gave us a map to reality. And reality is messy. It's contradictory. It's uncomfortable. But it's also finally true. Let's recap the transformation we've walked through together. You started this video believing you were in control. You thought your thoughts were your own. Your choices were conscious. Your suffering was just bad luck, or bad chemistry, or moral failure. Now you know you're not the author. You're the editor, trying to make sense of a draft written by a committee of ghosts. Your parents, your wounds, your culture, your body, your repressed desires, your unconscious drives. But here's the gift in that realization. Once you stop pretending you're in control, you could start building actual influence. You can't control the unconscious, but you can learn its language. You can negotiate with it. You can stop fighting a war you'll never win and start building a relationship with the parts of yourself you've been exiling. You've learned that your symptoms aren't defects, they're messages. That your defense mechanisms aren't weaknesses, they're survival strategies. That your childhood isn't an excuse, it's an explanation. That your dreams aren't random, they're coded communication from your unconscious. That your sexuality isn't shameful, it's your life force. That your desire to give up sometimes isn't pathological, it's human. And most importantly, you've learned this. The cure isn't in fixing yourself, it's in meeting yourself, in saying the unsayable, in feeling the unfelt, in bringing the unconscious into consciousness, not through force or willpower, but through curiosity, compassion, and courage. Here's your mantra. Carry it with you. Say it when you're overwhelmed. Say it when you're confused. Say it when you catch yourself repeating the same painful pattern for the 1,000th time. I am not broken. I am not weak. I am brilliantly, ruthlessly adapted to survive a life I no longer have to live. My symptoms are not my enemy. They're my teachers. And the moment I stop running from my own mind is the moment I become free. Say it again. Slower. Let it land. I am not broken. I was just scared. And now I'm ready to look. Because that's what Freud's entire body of work comes down to. Not a cure, not a solution, but an invitation. Are you ready to look? Are you willing to see what you've been hiding from? Are you brave enough to meet the parts of yourself you've been taught to exile? And if the answer is yes, even a tentative, frightened yes, then everything changes. You stop being a passenger in your own life. You stop wondering why you keep doing things you don't understand. You stop feeling like a stranger to yourself. Because you've stepped backstage, you've met the authors of your script, and you've realized they're not your enemies. They're just scared children and harsh critics and ancient drives, all trying to keep you safe in the only ways they know how. And once you see them clearly, you can thank them. You can say, thank you for protecting me. Thank you for helping me survive. But I'm okay now. I'm strong enough to feel what I've been afraid to feel. I'm ready to want what I've been afraid to want. I'm ready to be alive in the full, messy, vulnerable way that life requires. That's the promise of Freudian psychology. Not that you'll be happy, not that you'll be cured, but that you'll be awake, conscious, in relationship with your own depths. And that's worth more than happiness, because happiness comes and goes. But consciousness, real, hard-won self-knowledge that stays with you, that transforms you, that makes you free. Now here's what I ask of you, not because I need it, but because you do. If something in this video landed for you, if you felt seen, challenged, or shaken awake, leave a comment. Tell me which idea hit hardest. Tell me which defense mechanism you recognized in yourself. Tell me what you're going to do differently tomorrow. Tell me what you've been running from and what you're finally ready to face. Not for me, for you. because writing it down makes it real, because saying it out loud, even to strangers on the internet, breaks the spell of secrecy. Because the moment you acknowledge something, you create the possibility of change. And that's what Freud understood better than anyone. The cure is in the conversation. The transformation is in the telling. And if you want more of this, more depth, more honesty, more philosophy that doesn't insult your intelligence or pretend life is simple when it's not, subscribe. Hit the bell. Not so you stay updated or because I need your metrics, but so you keep choosing to grow instead of sleepwalk. So you keep choosing consciousness over comfort. So you keep choosing the hard, beautiful work of becoming who you actually are. Because here's the truth. This isn't self-help. This is self-honesty. And self-honesty is the most radical act available to you. In a world that wants you numb, distracted, consuming, obedient, choosing to look at yourself clearly is rebellion. Choosing to feel what you've been taught not to feel is courage. Choosing to want what you've been told you shouldn't want is freedom. And if Freud taught us anything, it's that honesty. No matter how uncomfortable, no matter how destabilizing, no matter how much it threatens our carefully constructed sense of who we are, is the only way out of the maze. The only way to stop repeating the patterns. The only way to stop being haunted by the ghosts of our past. The only way to become finally, truly, brokenly, beautifully ourselves. So thank you for staying, for listening, for being willing to look into the dark, for having the courage to admit you don't have it all figured out, for being human enough to struggle, to doubt, to feel lost sometimes, for trusting that there's wisdom in your confusion and meaning in your pain. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, be gentle with yourself. You're carrying more than anyone can see. You're braver than you know. And you're not alone in this. We're all walking around with unconscious minds running the show. All of us trying to make sense of scripts we didn't write. All of us doing the best we can with the tools we were given. The only difference is now you know. Now you see. Now you're awake. And that changes everything.